This is Dina, welcome to the Den.
So last year I covered Batman Returns, which was a Christmas movie, so this year I figured,
what the hell, one more Tim Burton Christmas movie.
As I've indicated before, I do love Tim Burton. Of course, I haven't seen everything by him. In typical Dina style, there are Tim Burton movies that I always intend to watch but never seem to get around to. I never did see Big Fish, and somehow I still haven't seen Sweeney Todd or Alice in Wonderland.
I know everyone hates that one, but I'd be willing to give it a chance since I tend to really enjoy Tim Burton's movies.
Even the ones that everyone else hates. I think the only one I've ever disliked was Mars Attacks, but I've only seen it once and sometimes it takes a second viewing for me to appreciate a movie that's a little different than I was expecting. I'm sure not everyone loves his style, but I do. It's a weird mix of dark and whimsical where it's kind of hard to explain how it works, it just does. Ah, Tim Burton and Danny Elfman. They go together like Steven Spielberg and John Williams. I still haven't forgiven you, Denise Genovese. So this story is set up like a fairy tale. An old woman is tucking her daughter in for bed as it's snowing outside, and the kid asks where snow comes from. So Grandma tells her a story which is going to be the main part of the movie.
And once there was even a man who had scissors for hands.
Hands? Scissors?
No, scissor hands.
Have fun trying to tell a story to this kid. I bet she interrupted every 5 minutes. It's kind of interesting comparing Edward Scissorhands to Batman Returns. Both are Christmas movies that have Tim Burton written all over them. Aside from the fact that Batman Returns is obviously an adaptation, where Edward Scissorhands is completely original, the biggest difference is that Batman Returns is this whole world of dark, eccentric architecture with costumed freaks, where Edward Scissorhands is a fish-out-of-water story where the costumed freak is taken out of the dark, eccentric world and plunked into a pastel-colored, exaggerated suburbia. Fun fact, this movie was filmed in a real neighborhood where they had to paint all of the houses. Then they had to repaint them afterwards so they'd look the way they did before. One fun thing about this movie, for me anyway, is that a lot of the actors are also in other things I like.
So those of you who hate it when I bog down a video with actor trivia are SOL, because there's going to be a lot of it here.
Avon calling!
The Avon lady is Peg, who is the nicest woman in the world and best movie mom ever. She is played by Diane Wiest, who has been in a lot of things, but I mostly remember her as the preacher's wife in Footloose.
Good.
The lady at the door, Helen, is played by Conchata Ferrell. She's basically a character actor and has been in a lot of things. You know that heavy-set lady with the red hair who is really sassy and kind of abrasive you've probably seen in a lot of shows? That's Conchata Ferrell. Off the top of my head, I mostly remember her as the one saving grace in LA Law after it had jumped the shark.
Hiya, Leland. I hear you need someone to save your ass.
Anyway, I love her to death.
Come on, Peg. I never buy anything from you. You know that.
I know.
Bye.
Bye, Helen.
That is Kathy Baker, who I mostly know from a quirky little show called Picket Fences, which I have mentioned before because Tom Skerritt and Zelda Rubinstein from Poltergeist 3 were also in it. Anyway, it's funny because in that show, Kathy Baker plays the mom, who is also the town doctor, so seeing her play the town cougar in this movie is hilarious to me. Anyway, her name is Joyce, and she is completely shameless.
Can't you see there's a vehicle in my driveway? Well, I'm surprised you don't realize that means I'm busy.
Everyone is so mean to poor Peg. I like how she passes by the house of the religious fanatic whose name is Esmeralda, and is like, nope. Anyway, she's having such bad luck, she figures, what the hell, may as well try the big creepy gothic mansion at the end of the block. You know, like all suburban neighborhoods have. Which makes her passing up Esmeralda even funnier. I never noticed before what a bad effect that is. Yikes. So this mansion sticks out like a sore thumb next to the pastel-colored suburban neighborhood. But once she opens the gate, she moves past the creepy facade and discovers a beautiful, lush garden filled with topiaries. I can't help but think of that as being symbolic of how she discovers Edward in a little while. She catches a glimpse of someone in the window of the attic, but no one answers when she knocks on the door, so she goes inside.
Hello? Avon calling!
The way Peg in general clashes with the atmosphere of this place is hilarious.
Ooh, this is some huge house, isn't it? Thank goodness for those aerobics classes.
Anyway, she makes it up to the attic where she finds a collage of various images that seem to have a hand motif. I like that one of them is a mother holding a baby. That's some more symbolism right there. And then she turns around to find a figure skulking in a dark corner.
You don't have to hide from me.
He starts moving toward her, and that's when she realizes that maybe this isn't a good idea after all, and starts to leave. But then...
Don't go.
What happened to you?
I'm not finished.
Oh! Those are your hands?
She realizes that he's actually quite young, and when she asks about his parents, he only says...
You didn't wake up.
Implying that he had a father at some point, but not anymore.
No, I won't hurt you. Let me give you a good astringent, and this will help to prevent infection. What's your name?
Edward?
I am dying right now. She is so nice, and he's so sad.
I think you should just come home with me.
By the way they edited this scene for the trailer is unintentionally hilarious.
Those are your hands. I think you should just come home with me.
Those are your hands? You better come with me.
Anyway, she takes him home, and now he's happy. Aww.
Oh!
The way these two play off each other is brilliant and adorable. She becomes his surrogate mom, like, instantly. Geez, even that treehouse is pastel.
Listen, I was standing outside and I was talking to Carol, and Peg drove by, and she had somebody with her in the car.
Meanwhile, she hasn't even gotten home yet, and the neighbors are already gossiping.
Okay, I'll be right there. Don't do anything without me.
Also, this lady was in Pet Cemetery.
Don't mention it.
Here we are.
So Peg takes Edward home, and he is completely enthralled with her house and is instantly drawn to the family photos.
Here they are down at the lake fishing.
Peg is just so proud of her family and so happy when she talks about them, I can't even.
That's my family.
He's especially interested in the pictures of the daughter Kim. Gotta love that Sears portrait.
Isn't she beautiful?
He is really interested in that smoke detector. Anyway, Peg drops him off in Kim's room with some clothes to put on while she goes to answer the phone. He manages to cut himself again while looking in the mirror. Oh. And of course the room has a waterbed, which he is totally confused by, and of course he ruins it. Yeah, we'll just pretend that didn't happen. It's actually kind of clever how he tries to get into the pants. He does it by dropping them on the floor and stepping into them. Success! The shirt doesn't go so well, but Peg helps him out.
You look fine, just fine.
She's like, God damn it. Meanwhile, the neighbors start to gather outside, but the religious fanatic is suspicious.
What did I do with my sister?
I love how she hesitates a little before asking him to cut the thread, like she's afraid it might offend him. But of course it doesn't, because he's a sweetheart.
I have a doctor friend who I think could help you.
Really?
There's kind of a running, I don't want to say gag because it's not funny per se, but people are always telling Edward, hey, I think I have a doctor friend who can help you, and then it never comes up again. It's kind of weird.
So the neighbors apparently had some kind of meeting and now they're dispersing. Weird. These people are weird. Anyway, it's now nighttime. The dad, Bill, and their younger kid, Kevin, have come home, and a really awkward dinner takes place. Because how is he going to use the silverware? The kid just shamelessly stares the whole time. And the dad is hilarious because he's so clueless.
This must be quite a change for you, right, Ed?
Edward, dear. I think he prefers Edward.
Oh, sure. I bet the view must be spectacular, huh, Ed?
He's just kind of in his own little bubble.
Bill, can I have the salt and pepper, please?
It's a minor detail, but I like how Peg has to ask him to pass the salt twice before he hears her. It's just so telling. Oh God, be careful with those things.
I've lost me pee.
He eventually figures out that scissor blades can make pretty good dinner knives.
Great.
And the poor guy doesn't starve. Later on, Peg tucks him in. Aww.
Good night.
He doesn't much care for the waterbed, though. Or that little clown.
Can't sleep. Clown will eat me.
The next morning, everyone gets out of their pastel houses, gets in their pastel cars, and drives to work at the same time, which is probably also pastel. I love that visual. Later on, Peg is trying different makeup on Edward to try to cover up his scars. That's a good look.
The light concealing cream goes on first. Then you blend and blend and blend.
I love how she's telling him all the steps as if he'd ever be able to do it himself. Maybe after she calls that doctor friend of hers.
We'll cover up the scars and start with a completely smooth surface.
Either way, he looks worried. A little later, I love how Bill has just destroyed that one branch because he's distracted by the sports ball game on the radio.
It's out of here, it's history!
Meanwhile, Edward starts trimming some other hedges. Within minutes, there's a T-Rex in the yard. He's so proud of his work. I love the timing of the applause on the radio, too. Bill now actually has a TV set up in the backyard.
You did us!
And he's more interested in that than the fact that Edward just carved a topiary of the whole family.
Power of Satan is in him, I can feel it.
Oh, but here comes the religious fanatic to ruin everything, as they tend to do. He's like, the fuck just happened? Actually, he looks that way a lot. Meanwhile, the rest of the neighbors show up at the front door.
You all are hiding in there like a bunch of old hermit crabs.
Hi. And they've decided that Peg is going to throw a barbecue to introduce them all to Edward.
I'll bring coleslaw.
And I will bring the ambrosia salad.
At least it's potluck. By the way, I love Joyce's mermaid shirt. That totally suits her.
He has been sent first to tempt you, trample down the perversion of nature.
Did you hear that? He's a perversion of nature.
Yeah, to Joyce, perversion is always a good thing. Go away, Esmeralda, nobody likes you. So a little later, Edward is helping Peg with the food. He cuts himself, she treats it, and it's so sweet. Peg is just totally his mom now. Anyway, she uses an electric can opener, and it causes Edward to have a flashback to a time when the mansion was filled with robotics. Technically it still is, but they're covered in cobwebs and hard to make out. That's a cute idea for how the cookie cutters work, but they don't seem too effective. In any case, this is one dangerous-looking cookie factory. I like how that piece at the top looks like a scythe. It also looks a bit like a torture chamber for robots. Of course, the inventor is played by Vincent Price, and he just knocks it out of the park with how delighted he is with his invention. Tim Burton loves to cast actors from old horror movies. Last time it was Michael Gough from the Hammer films. Apparently I mispronounced his name last time. Kill us. Anyway, another robot's function is chopping celery, not unlike how Edward was chopping lettuce just now. And when the inventor picks up a heart-shaped cookie, he gets an idea. So does that mean that Edward remembers being that robot? Because that'd be kind of messed up.
What is my purpose?
You chop celery!
Oh my god.
So the barbecue has started, and guess what this guy says?
I got a doctor friend of mine. Might be able to help you.
Hey, hi, George Monroe. Whoa, it's a heck of a handshake you got there, Ed.
It's kind of weird how this was supposed to be an excuse for everyone to get to know Edward, but everyone is just talking to each other. Peg goes to check on him and feeds him a snack. So cute. Meanwhile, the other women are being pervs.
And just think what a single snip could do. Or undo.
Don't ever change, Conchata Ferrell.
I have my own infirmity.
This old guy, I'm not sure if he's saying it in the best way, but he seems to mean well.
Listen, don't you ever let anybody tell you you have a handicap.
That's pretty nice. Oh, but here comes Joyce. And the guy's like, that's my cue to leave.
Allow me.
These women travel in packs.
Soup, sir. What?
That night, Edward has another flashback, and through a series of crazy-looking drawings, we see him evolve from a robot to something more humanoid, but not quite there. The final step would have been giving him hands. We can see that his legs aren't attached yet, but he looks about the way he does now, minus the cuts on his face, and his hair is nicely brushed, because clearly someone was taking good care of him then. Anyway, the inventor is reading to him a book about etiquette.
But etiquette tells us just what is expected of us and guards us from all humiliation and discomfort.
Vincent Price makes even that book entertaining, but Edward isn't into it. So he switches to a limerick.
There was an old man from the Cape who made himself garments of crepe. When asked, will they tear, he replied, here and there, but they keep such a beautiful shape. Go ahead, smile, it's funny.
That smile is about as convincing as Data's, and almost as creepy. Anyway, Kim and her friends unexpectedly come home early from their camping trip, and her boyfriend Jim is played by Anthony Michael Hall. I think this is the only thing I've seen him in post-John Hughes movies and pre-Dead Zone series. And of course, Kim is played by Winona Ryder. Not that I need to explain to anyone who that is, but it's interesting to note that this was a direct result of her being in Beetlejuice. Anyway, none of them called ahead to say that they were coming home early, so Kim has no reason to think that there's anyone in her room. And they both end up scaring the shit out of each other. So much for that waterbed. Anyway, Peg tends to Kim while Bill tends to Edward, and each of them is given a new place to sleep.
She get you nervous?
But Bill has the bright idea to give Edward alcohol.
What is it?
Lemonade.
Edward, this is our daughter, Kim. Kim, this is Edward, who's gonna live with us.
Great first impression there. Thanks, Bill. The next day, Edward is making a topiary for Joyce and isn't feeling too well.
Wouldn't you like a nice, cool glass of lemonade?
Lemonade.
She's wearing flip-flops, so I really hope he aimed away from her feet. Anyway, Edward seems to have grown on everyone since Kevin takes him to show and tell, and the whole neighborhood is filled with topiaries. I like the kitten down the street, though that one's pretty clever. Kim and her friend and boyfriend aren't too crazy about him, though, and they're both over for dinner that night. That'll end well. So Jim's parents are really well off, and they're talking about how they had their house remodeled and such, as Edward cuts the roast for everyone. Both of these things are going to be important in a little while. Anyway, Bill gets on Edward for not charging for the gardening he's been doing for the neighbors.
Marge made him cookies today.
You can't buy a car with cookies, am I right, Jim?
Oh, that's true, sir. You can't.
Smart ass.
I can't eat that. He used his hands. I don't think it's sanitary.
You know, I tend to think she says that just because she's decided she doesn't like Edward because he's weird and just wants nothing to do with him. But she kind of makes a good point. He's basically using old hedge clippers to cut food. Either they've been washed really good, or the family is just so accustomed to having him do everything with those scissors that they just don't even think about it.
Otherwise, you'd think one of them would have spoken up and said, "It's okay, we washed them earlier."
Oh well. In any case, the meat ends up in Kim's lap, and since Edward has been crushing on her, he's devastated. Also, Jim is a dick. Even Bill seems to think so. The next day, Edward is trimming one of the topiaries and suddenly gets inspired to also trim that neighbor's dog.
Oh, this can't possibly be my Alexis!
I don't think it is. I'm not a dog expert, but I'm pretty sure that's a different breed. It's still cute how she runs up to Mommy to show off her new haircut.
Thank you.
So now everyone in the neighborhood is lining up to have their dogs trimmed, and Joyce is so happy with how hers turned out that she wants Edward to cut her hair. I'm now regretting that I didn't watch Sweeney Todd before making this video. I could have made a reference.
Oh well, every joke that could have been made about that has probably been done by now.
I love how every time Edward cuts hair, you can tell there's someone just outside the shot throwing tufts of hair into the air
while Johnny Depp goes.
I'm not being smartass, I genuinely do get a kick out of it. It just makes it that much more silly and fun. Burn that chair.
That was the single most thrilling experience of my whole life.
So he proceeds to cut everyone else's hair as well. With some of these, it's pretty impressive that he can get these styles with no gel or anything. All done with cutting, apparently. Finally, he cuts Peg's hair. She's just so proud of him. Anyway, Peg is back to seeing what she can do about Edward's scars. She manages to get a hold of the head of Avon and gets some advice from her.
I've always wanted to talk to her, but until now, I never had a reason. Thanks, Edward.
Anyway, sometime later, Edward comes home around the same time as Kim and Jim.
I only just now noticed that their names rhyme. That's how you know this relationship is destined to fail.
Anyway, it turns out that no one has a key, but Edward manages to pick the lock with one of his blades.
Thanks.
Yeah, you didn't break it or scratch it or anything.
Again, that's gonna come up again later. Anyway, Edward ends up on a local talk show. And oh look, someone else who knows a doctor that can help him.
I know a doctor that might be able to help you.
I'd like to meet him.
What is the deal with people saying that and then not following through?
Maybe later on they realize that doctor probably can't help him anyway, so they just hope he'll forget about it.
It's really kind of shitty to get someone's hopes up like that.
But since Peg was one of the people who said it, I guess that must mean that they have good intentions. Anyway, someone else in the audience comments that if he had normal hands, he wouldn't be special. He doesn't seem to know how to respond, but Peg answers for him.
No matter what, Edward will always be special.
Aww. Of course, a woman in the audience asks if he has a girlfriend, and he just kind of stares into the camera as Kim and her boyfriend and brother are watching from home. But as he leans into the mic, he accidentally cuts the cord and gets a shock.
Why are you laughing? He got hurt!
I wish we'd been taping that. I'd give my left nut to see that again.
It's so weird having Anthony Michael Hall playing this character. It's like Brian hit his head and woke up thinking he was Bender. So as well as Edward has been adapting and how everyone loves him, you have to know that things are going to go south at some point.
But I'm going to end part 1 before we get to that. If you haven't seen Edward Scissorhands yet, please watch it before I get to part 2.